What's up? It is January 17th, and yet there are still so many MLB free agents yet to sign. Let's kind of do a reset, take a look at the starting pitching market in particular, and go through what's left and do the tier list on these guys and talk about where everybody fits in at this point. And, just right off the bat, let's just take this guy and put him right where he should be. He is in that S tier, that top tier by himself. Trevor Bauer, that was really the case from day one of free agency, and it is still very much the case now. This is not a video about Trevor Bauer. This is a video about the rest of the market and how things look at this point, but he is definitely the top guy. So let's just go through and talk about the rest of this market. And you can see here I do have literally every single starting pitching free agent that MLB Trade Rumors has listed, slotted into tiers. We'll talk about the F tier later, but I wanted to go through one by one, and we're going through in alphabetical order other than Bauer here. So Brett Anderson. Brett Anderson is a guy who's one of the best ground ball pitchers in baseball, and not exciting, but he is a guy who's going to pitch well and give you some certainty in your rotation. So I put him in the C tier. And again, I'm taking these tiers as compared to the rest of the free agent market right now is kind of my ideology behind where I'm putting these guys. Next up, Chris Archer. He is a guy, a lot of potential. The Pirates gave up a boatload to get him. He's gone through injuries. I'm pretty concerned about him delivering on his promise. It's not like he was pitching that great before that injury anyway, so I'm putting him down in the D tier. I think he's a guy that if your team signs him, you can get a little bit more excited about due to some of that kind of name recognition. And, he does have a ceiling that's a little bit more interesting than some of the guys that, Brett Anderson is a great example. Chris Archer has way more of a ceiling. You can get more excited about him, but in terms of certainty, Brett Anderson just gives you so much more. Again, one of the best ground ball pitchers in baseball. Jake Arrieta is next up. I have him also in the D tier. He's another guy who, brings that Cy Young pedigree with him, but we're ways away from that now. Never really was productive for the Phillies. Now he's in his mid-30s. Not really too excited about him. Next up, Mike Foltynewicz. This is a younger guy, a former All-Star. It is a pretty big red flag to me, though, that the Braves just sort of gave up on him for nothing. Physically didn't look great, lost a lot of velocity. Interested to see how he comes back. He might end up being sort of the best value of anybody on this market this year, or he could be, his career could be over. It's just one of those guys where it's just hard to say. Cole Hamels, didn't get out there much in 2020, but he looked really good in 2019 and 2018. He actually had a couple good seasons there, but at, entering his age 37 season here, I also have him in the D tier. Kind of some of the things you could say about Arrieta, you could say about Hamels. I don't know how much you can count on a guy like that either, given his age. However, one guy I do find a little bit interesting is Jay Happ. Left-handed starting pitcher. He's been with the Yankees the last couple of years, and I was looking in. He's given up 45 home runs the past 2 seasons with the Yankees, and his expected home runs per Baseball Savant was 32 point something. So he's given up kind of a lot of bare wall scrapers or barely home runs that went out. And that's sort of a big difference between his overall production between what he's done with the Yankees and what he's done with Toronto before that. And, he had a pretty good, short sample in 2020. His numbers look pretty good. He's a guy who's getting up there at 38, but I do think he kind of deserves to be that bump above. Rich Hill up next. As a Twins fan, got to see him pitch pretty well last year, but I'm still going to put him in that D tier as well. Never a guy who was really all that healthy to begin with, but now he's getting up there. This is his age 41 season. No questioning that curveball is still a good pitch, but again, just a guy I'm going to put in that tier. Next, we have Mike Leake. Sat out the 2020 season, but this guy's still, he's only 33 years old, so a younger option among some of these guys. And just such a dependable, reliable starting pitcher. Not that he was giving you much to get excited about, but never walks anybody, fields his position well, is a really good athlete. Probably not a guy you're going to feel good about pitching in the playoff situations. That's why he ends up going in this D tier. But, he's a guy who's going to help a team during the regular season and help sort of raise the floor of a rotation. Next up, John Lester, yet another one of these older veteran free agents I'm putting in this D tier. Did not have a good season in 2020. He's getting up there as well. Just don't know what you can count on him. Next up, Jake Odorizzi, and this is a guy who I do think is among the better free agent options. I wouldn't say he's an A-tier starting pitcher, but in the conversation that we're having around this free agent market, I do think that Odorizzi is among the better free agent starting pitchers after Trevor Bauer. When he's on, he's definitely an all-star caliber pitcher. Next up, James Paxton. A lot of the same things you could say about him. Yes, Paxton's been injured a lot. Odorizzi as well. But when he's been healthy and on the mound, Paxton has been really, really good. And again, he's still only 32. Odorizzi, you can see there, entering his 31 season. Both those guys are also pretty young. So you can project them a little easier than some of those guys are getting up there. Rick Porcello is a guy who actually made my C tier here. He's pitched better than his ERA would suggest the past few years. And again, he's only 32. One of these guys who entered the league so young that it seems like he's much older. And he's been remarkably durable. I think I was looking, and obviously other than this shortened 2020 season, I think the fewest starts he's made in a season was 28. So just a guy who goes out there and pitches. Again, another guy with a Cy Young pedigree. He's not going to be that for you anymore, but a guy who can provide a lot of value. Next up is Jose Quintana, and I have him in my C tier as well. He's probably never going to get back to that Chicago White Sox level that he was, sort of an all-star caliber pitcher year in, year out. Didn't pitch. I think he only pitched about 10 innings in 2020, so not entering the market at a good time for him, but I do put him above some of these other names still. Garrett Richards, we're getting into some guys that may be a little bit controversial because, we talk about injury histories. That's a common theme we're talking about with all these guys. And Garrett Richards spent multiple seasons barely pitching. But early in his career with the Angels, this guy was great. And, he was out there quite a bit for the Padres this past year. And he's still throwing like 95 average on his fastball, which is excellent for a starting pitcher. I'm really intrigued by him, even with the very decorated injury history. It's kind of a shame that 2020 ended up being a short season because this might have been an opportunity for him to go out there and have more of a full season than he's put together in many years. So I find him really intriguing. Matt Shoemaker, speaking of, injuries, another guy who just cannot stay on the field. But when he's pitched well. I find him interesting, but he's going to slide into that D tier. Masahiro Tanaka, probably the second best starting pitcher on the market, in my opinion, behind Bauer. I don't know, there's going to be a massive market for him. I'm sure there are a lot of teams that would love to have him. But I think looking at it from the other perspective, it seems like he's going to have a very narrow view of teams that he's interested in. I think he really wants to be a Yankee, and the door is open for him to return to Japan if he wants as well. Adam Wainwright. I've been throwing shade at a lot of these older guys, putting them in this D tier other than Happ. Adam Wainwright, I'm actually going to put up in the B tier. This guy had a really good 2020 season. Yes, he's entering his age 39 season. It seems crazy to depend on him for much, but the curveball is still really good. Going back to 2019, he was better than you probably remembered him in 2019, and he made two really good postseason starts for St. Louis as well in 2019. Maybe one of these guys, and you could say this for some of these other veterans too, maybe some of these guys are benefit from the short season. They were throwing during the shutdown, but throwing in competitive innings are two different things. So maybe, there's a little bit left in the tank with some of these older guys. Wainwright is the guy that I would bank on the most. A career Cardinal, I'm sure he wants to go back there, and a reunion makes all the sense in the world for St. Louis as well. So sort of much like Tanaka, it may be a situation where he has a big market, but he's not very interested in many places. We'll yet to find out. And then Taijuan Walker, I would put him with Garrett Richards, and maybe this is a little bit controversial how high I have him, but I'm going to put him in the B tier as well. A thing that really jumps out, he is only 28 years old, and another guy like Rick Porcello, who he entered the majors as such a young player. I think he was only 20 when he made his major league debut. A guy who's really had to grow up over the past 8 years of his career. He completely bottomed out. I mean, barely pitched in the majors at all in 2019 and 2018. He had to be, a showcase guy last offseason to even get teams interested, and then got signed to a really, really low deal with the Mariners. But this is a guy with a good foundation. He throws 5 different pitches. I think if you get him in the right situation, he was traded to Toronto mid-season, and that didn't seem to really throw him off. I don't think he's nearly as good as his ERA suggests from 2020. I think if we would have had a full season, that would have come up quite a bit. However, everything's trending in the right direction. That was such a nice thing to see him back on the mound in 2020 and pitching well. And I think he, just getting back on the mound would have been a big deal, and making, 10 plus starts in 2020. The fact that he made good starts and put up good numbers pushes him up the list for me. And again, the age, I do really think that factors in why I put him so high. So that was the guys in these top tiers that I thought did sort of establish themselves above the rest of these pitchers. However, let's pull up this F class and take a look at some of these names. Certainly some familiar names in this list. A lot of guys that can help, establish a floor of your rotation, like innings eaters. Like Mike Fiers really stands out to me as a guy who, doesn't strike a lot of guys out, but he doesn't issue a lot of walks. So he's going to pitch you a lot of innings, keep you in a lot of ball games. But again, not a guy I felt like I could elevate. And then there's also some guys who I think are probably going to be viewed by contending teams as relievers, but maybe depending on what teams are interested, they may end up as starters. Trevor Cahill was a guy who stuck out to me in that regard. Old friend Homer Bailey here with the Twins. I think he's a guy who could be argued should be in that D tier, but I opted to leave him down. Tyler Chatwood, another guy who I've been talking about as interesting based on just the pitches the stuff that he has. Again, I think he, like Cahill, is a guy who, if you're a contending team, you're kind of looking at him as a 6-starter bullpen guy, more likely. But another name to be noted on here. Carlos Rodon, you could put him in the same conversation as Mike Foltynewicz. A really young guy who had a really high pedigree, still only 28 years old, but I'm going to put him down here because, again, the White Sox, much like the Braves with Foltynewicz, just kind of gave up on him. That's a big red flag. He really hasn't produced up to his talent either, but certainly a guy whoever signs him, that team's fan base can get a little bit more excited about Carlos Rodon than most of the other names on this list. But most of these guys on this list are probably going to sign major league deals. And that just shows you how many. I think there's 21 guys up here, or at least 20. And then all these there's still a lot to get sorted out on the free agent market. And again, these guys down here, most fan bases aren't going to get real excited about. Even most of these guys in this D tier. However, some of these guys do have that name recognition that more casual fans are going to get excited about, or have that sort of pin a dream on them, like Chris Archer. If Chris Archer can come back and there aren't health concerns, I mean, some people probably making a tier list might put Archer in the B tier, depending on how confident they are he comes back. So that's the way I have them sorted out. I want to hear from you. Who do you think I have higher? Who would you have higher? Who would you have lower? What are some names that stick out? Yes, we're getting late in free agency, it feels like, but this showing all these names really kind of hammers home how many guys are left. However, kind of on the flip side, this was never really, in my opinion, that strong of a starting pitching free agent class. And this kind of hammers that home too, sort of how quickly we get to the Brett Anderson, Jay Happ, Rick Porcello, Jose Quintana types. There are a lot of guys left, but I don't know that there are that many guys that stand out. And that may be exactly what's sort of slowing things down because, are you a team that's really going to push yourself to try to get, let's say Garrett Richards, when, you might feel like Jake Arrieta is just as likely, if not more likely, to put in a similar performance. There's little that differentiates a lot of these guys. And I think that's what is keeping the inactivity going is, why not just wait and find out who falls and maybe is a few $1 million cheaper, and then you can sort of spend that money elsewhere. So that's my take on the tiers and on the free agents. So I do want to get into a little bit more of a Twins perspective on this. And, right now, I think they do need to add 2 starting pitchers at least. I expect them to trade for a starter. I don't know if that's more of a hope than an expectation, but that's one of the things I've predicted, is that they will be active in the trade market between now and opening day or whenever things actually happen. So I do think probably it's more likely that their bigger addition will come through the trade market. But some guys that Walker, again, just talking about him some more, and Richards, those are 2 guys who I could see that have some more upside to put in like an A-tier season. And there's not, there has been health concerns with those guys in the past, and they've been injury prone, but I mean, we've been talking, there aren't guys either we have guys who are injury prone, guys who haven't really pitched that great, or guys who are getting into their mid to late 30s. So, pick your poison kind of a deal here. So those are 2 guys that I really like. And, going from there isn't a whole lot to get excited about, but, hoping that they're also interested in Jake Odorizzi. But I really think he's a hot name on the market right now, given the lack of other options, because again, I do think Tanaka is not going to be very interested in going many other places. Bauer, not many teams are going to be willing to invest that kind of money in Bauer. He's only going to have a few teams probably willing to go as far as he wants to go. So I do think Odorizzi is going to have a lot of suitors. And then some of these other names that I have fairly high, I think the Twins need to try to, I would take more of a risk reward type pitcher, in my opinion, than sort of an establish the floor. I do think the Twins rotation has a good enough floor right now with Kenta Maeda, Jose Barrios, Michael Pineda, and Randy Dobnak. Yes, injuries are going to happen. You should build enough rotation depth to handle that. And they did that in 2020, barely getting anything from Jake Odorizzi. So I think they need to build out more of that depth, but I don't think they need sort of your innings eater, Brett Anderson, Rick Porcello types. I think they should be targeting maybe some guys who you could think could take a next step, or even the guys who, there is something to the older guys who, when they're healthy, they're likely to deliver a good performance. And that's what I think why Rich Hill made so much sense in 2020. You don't know how many innings you're going to get out of Rich Hill, but man, Rich Hill's been a very effective pitcher for a long time when he's been healthy, and that was true again in 2020. So I actually think a Rich Hill reunion would make quite a bit of sense. Mike Leake, another one of those sort of just innings eaters that I don't think makes sense for the Twins. Matt Shoemaker is another guy in sort of more of that maybe Richards Walker mode, that when he's been healthy, he's actually been pretty decent. So he's a guy who stands out as someone who could be of interest to me. And in this F tier, there's it's just all over the place. This was sort of meant to be not a reaction video, but a pre-action video. I kind of wanted to put out there before these guys signed, this is what I think of these guys and where I have them tiered. So then, it's not a situation where all of a sudden, I've talked myself into getting excited about, somebody who I had in my F tier. I can look back and be like, you know what? We got to call it like it is. I wasn't excited about this guy. So you can hold me accountable to these as well. I know a lot of times when your team signs a player, you want to get excited about them. So, and I'm not saying I'm not going to do that. There probably will be some me talking myself into that, but hang in there, everybody. Stuff is going to be moving. Sooner or later, teams are going to be signing guys. We did see some of the movement start to happen, and I think that's going to continue over the coming weeks. Thank you so much for checking this out, clicking on this video and watching it all the way through here. My name's Tom again. Please subscribe for more Twins talk and baseball talk here on YouTube. We'll talk again soon.